Welcome to the Sports Spectrum Podcast, where faith and sports collide. Here's your host, Jason Romano.
This is episode number 62 of the Sports Spectrum Podcast. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the show. My name is Jason Romano. It is great to have you here listening and tuning into the program today. As always, you can download our podcast and subscribe. Apple, iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, everywhere podcasts are found. Just take your tablet, your iPhone, your Android device, go to the podcast page and click subscribe and never miss an episode of the Sports Spectrum Podcast. It'll come right to your phone, and every single time we release one of these episodes, you won't miss it. You can also check out all of our content at sportsspectrum.com, where we have daily devotionals as well as content posting every single day on the intersection of sports and faith. Today's guest, his name is Cazz McCaslin. Now, he is the founder and president of Upward Sports. Some of you who listen here might be aware of the Upward basketball program. I know our church here in Bristol, Connecticut has been part of the Upward basketball family for 14 years now. It's a wonderful program, and Cazz is the guy who founded it back in 1995. And on this episode of the podcast, we talk a lot about youth sports and just the culture of youth sports, where we are today as far as how we approach youth sports, being a parent of kids, getting our kids involved, and just sort of the competitive juices that align into the youth sports world. And Cazz also talks about why he sort of came up with the concept and idea of Upward Basketball, which is really a wonderful ministry that does also do a lot of what we do, which is intersect the sports world, a basketball program, and do it on biblical principles and intersect it with faith in Christ. So really cool thing here. I think you guys will enjoy this episode. And also, Cazz and Upward are featured in the latest edition of Sports Spectrum magazine, which is releasing basically right now as we're releasing this podcast. And our newest edition of the magazine features Upward on the cover and a really neat story inside that we'll talk about in this podcast on Cazz and his connection with Dr. James Naismith, the guy who invented basketball, the inventor of the game of basketball. And we really love for you to check that article out by subscribing and partnering with us at Sports Spectrum. So go to sportsspectrum.com, click the join button over at the top there, and for $36, it makes a great gift. $36 for an entire year, which is practically nothing when you really look at what you're paying every day for coffee and different things. It's basically $3 a month, and it allows you to become a member of our family, to partner with us and become joining in on the membership here at Sports Spectrum. But also, it's a great idea for a gift. You can give it to a friend from church. You can give it to your kids. You can give it to your grandkids. Maybe donate it to a church or a youth group of some sort. But the magazine itself is what you get as part of the subscription and the membership. You get 4 magazines, but you also help fund Sports Spectrum. We're a nonprofit, and this podcast that we provide to you for free, the articles that we provide on the website for free, is all a part of your donation as becoming a member of Sports Spectrum. So we'd love to have you come alongside with us. It is tax deductible. And again, $36 for an entire year gets you into the membership family and hanging out with us here at Sports Spectrum. All right, without further ado, let us get to our interview. He is Cazz McCaslin, the founder and president of Upward Basketball. Cazz, how are you?
I'm on top of the world, my brother. Thank you so much, man. What a joy to be with you today. Thank you for the invite.
It is wonderful to talk to you, and I'm excited to kind of dive into your story a little bit and the ministry of Upward Basketball. So let's start there. Tell us, you started this program, this ministry. You had an idea in 1995. It was birthed. Tell us about starting Upward Basketball and why your heart called you to begin this ministry.
Well, it's kind of a long answer, but really a simple one when you really get down to it. I fell in love with sports way before I fell in love with Jesus, and it was actually sports that led me to Jesus, which was really exciting because ultimately my dream was to be able to use sports as a tool to lead people to Jesus ultimately. And when the Lord called me into the ministry, I was actually working at the very first Home Depot there ever was, and my brother was in the management program there, and And it was really a lot of fun to work alongside of him. And then the Lord really just tapped me on the shoulder and led me to the opportunity to use sports as a tool to reach communities for Christ through something as simple as a ball. And I got really excited about it and thinking about it. And then after a long journey of education, which I had not planned to go to college when I got out of high school, and I'm thankful the Lord led me that way eventually, and ended up having to go back to school and graduated from Truett McConnell and the University of Georgia. But then I got called to a church in Spartanburg, South Carolina, where I was the minister of recreation. And you're as a rec guy, you're responsible for using all kinds of sports and recreational things to reach out to your community. But and all of those were a great joy. But for whatever reason, the basketball program, Upward Basketball, took off at that one church, and I did it there for 10 years, and each year it just grew and grew and grew, and it really was in the last few years where the Lord really began to speak to me, as He often does through my precious bride. My wife was very committed to what we did and how we do it, but it was about year 7 or 8 that we actually had about 520 kids, and we had 27 kids on the waiting list. And I was so excited about going home and telling my wife that we had so many kids, that we had 27 kids on the waiting list. And when I told her that, she said, "Wow, babe, if that's really what you wanted to do was put 27 kids on the waiting list, then you did really good." And I thought, well, wow, I was really thinking about the 520. And she said, "We didn't get into this to turn kids away. We got into this to reach kids." And it really touched my heart. And through that, we really started praying about it. And our pastor was just a real incredible leader. And he brought in a guy by the name of Dr. Johnny Hunt. Many people know him down in Woodstock, Georgia. And he really came and talked to us about how to grow our church. But the reality of it is he was really speaking to my heart on how to grow upward. And it really touched me about the fact that we were leaving these children out. And so through that, I went to a man in our church that had the wherewithal to actually build us another gym. And I really thought that that's what we were going to do, was add another gym onto our church so that we could reach a few more kids. And he made a statement that literally changed my life. He said, "Caz, you don't need another gym." He said, "You need 1,000 gyms." And that was just it was a vision casting moment for me. It was a mind stretch. And I knew that it was something that was way bigger than me. I knew it was something that was a God thing, not a Caz thing. And I just needed to get out of the way and be obedient to whatever it was he called me to do. And he began to open the doors. And in 1995 is when we launched this not-for-profit organization. And we set it out to reach 1,000 gyms and reach communities that had a passion, and partner with churches that had a passion for reaching their communities for Christ through something as simple as a ball. And you of all people know how a ball can be so attractive, and it literally knocks down economic barriers. It knocks down racial barriers. It knocks down religious barriers. You throw a ball out there, and there's a awful lot of commonalities that come together for the fun of a game, and you really have an opportunity to share the truth of Jesus. And it's just been so fun since that time. So it really all began because of 27 kids.
It's amazing to think that a vision can lead to where it is right now. I mean, we're talking about millions of kids that have gone through the Upward Sports program. Tell us about just putting it together, because I think a lot of people have a vision to start things, and that's a good place to go. You want to have that idea, you want to have that vision, but then to actually execute it. And I know you mentioned specifically about how God opened doors, and we say that a lot in the ministry, but can you kind of describe how and maybe what specifically was taking place for this vision to really come and be a reality and kind of take off the way it has?
Yeah, well, that's a great question, Jason. I really appreciate that. I'll tell you this, and it's interesting. I've been sharing this with our staff recently, it's been a fresh new fire really in us for a lot of reasons that's going on at Upward right now. But it's been very much reflective of what happened 22 years ago. And I've shared with them, as I shared with my wife when it was just the two of us years ago, there's two things in this world that scare me to death. I'm really very afraid of two things. And number one is to run off and do something that God didn't tell me to do. And the second thing I'm really afraid of is to not do something that he did tell me to do. And so I'll tell you that both of those require hearing God's voice. And when you know that he has called you to do something, and you know that this is what it is that he's set aside for you to do, and you just cannot avoid it, you can't get away from it, you couldn't run from it. I was scared to death not to do this because I knew through another long series of stories, I knew beyond a shadow of a doubt that this is what God had called us to do, and I was scared not to do it. It was so obvious to me, and believe me, I'm the kind of guy that needs the writing on the wall. I mean, I need that Jonah experience. I need that Jesus across the pond saying, "Come walk on the water" to me. I need it out loud. But when you hear that and you know that, then man, you got to do what he tells you to do. And that's when I knew it was nothing. It just does not. This is not my vision, Jason. This is something that I know God planned a long time ago. Ephesians 2:10 is a really big pillar for us. It's a spiritual marker in the life of my wife and I that says that we're God's workmanship, created in Christ Jesus to do good works, which God planned in advance for us to do. And when you realize there's something that he planned a long time ago and he's inviting you to be a part of it, I'm just scared to death not to do it. And so it's been really a spiritual marker for us in that time. So the thing that I think that leads to the answer to your question is when you get to that point in your life where you know he's spoken to you, you got to make a choice. There's always a fork in the road, and the fork in the road is the difference between faith and fear. And I've always shared with people that faith and fear, in my opinion, have the exact same definition. Faith is the belief in something you cannot see is going to happen. And fear is the belief in something you cannot see is going to happen. And so you have to decide, are you going to listen to what the world says, which would be fearful, or to listen to what God says, which would be stepping out on faith? But both of those have the same definition. And if you hear God's voice, man, I'm telling you, you got to go. You just got to do it.
Let's talk about the design of Upward basketball. Now, just full disclosure, our church here in Connecticut, Hillside Community Church, has put on an Upward basketball league for the last 12 years. So I know the answer to this, but for all of our listeners who don't know, Cazz, because I think the model and the way that Upward is done is a little different than your typical youth sports program, especially your typical youth basketball league. So tell us how you went about putting together the way Upward basketball is run on a daily and weekly basis. What was your process in putting that together?
Well, the very first thing we wanted to do was, you have to provide a good sports experience, and hopefully, our ultimate desire is to provide the best sports experience. And a lot of people say, yeah, I hear what you're saying there, but this is about the ministry, and it is about the ministry, and it is ultimately about creating an opportunity to be able to share Christ with those that are out there searching for the truth, and they don't even know they're searching for the truth, but they're searching for something. And the numbers, the stats, which I won't bore you with, of this country and how we're spending our time, crazy as it sounds, way more and more towards sports and way away from anything that has to do with church.
Yep.
I mean, this country has become very complacent about God and about the church, and certainly about a personal relationship with Christ. So as a result, this sounds really crazy. You have to think like lost people. You have to think like people that are searching for the truth, but they really don't have a relationship with Christ. And if you're thinking like that, and you're a parent, you say, I want to take my kids to the best sporting experience, a place where they learn integrity and character and team, what it means to be on a team and not to quit and to give your best. And of course, I want my kid to have the opportunity to play and to participate and at least play, half the game and not be sitting on the bench. And the other thing is I don't want to spend, 5 nights a week, at practice and 3 hours each night. I mean, people are busy. And so we were trying to create, first of all, the best sports experience for the young athlete and the best sports experience for the parent. And then through that, you get the opportunity to build relationships and to show these people that you're reaching that there's so much more to life than the game of any sport you might put in front of them at the same time. So we were wanting to use sports as a tool to reach these families and build relationships with them so we can make a difference in their lives, not just in those few weeks, but eternally.
Absolutely. Now, I want you to share, because in the newest issue of Sports Spectrum magazine, which is out now and people can subscribe to it at sportspectrum.com, but there's an article in there called An Upward Vision. And it's a wonderful look at the connection with the guy who invented basketball, Dr. James Naismith, and yourself. So share that story with us.
Man, I tell you, Jason, this puts chills down my back just to even hear you introduce that. I'm so excited about this article. Man, your guys did a phenomenal job. But this happened actually, I think it was about 2 years ago. We had the very incredible privilege to go to the Final Four, and we were there with some friends from Athletes in Action, which those guys are just phenomenal. Mark Householder and those guys are just such a joy. And we got the opportunity to go to this Legends of the Hardwood breakfast where they give away the John Wooden Award. And anyway, while we were there at this breakfast, one of the people that they interviewed was Jim Naismith, who is the grandson of the founder and inventor of the game of basketball. And I just thought, man, what an incredible connection to meet the grandson of the guy that created basketball. I mean, my life has been around this game, for so long. And so I'm sitting at this table, several tables back, from where he was sitting. But I could not hardly wait for the breakfast to be over and somebody to say amen. And I jumped up and took off. My wife was like, "Where are you going?" And I'm like, "Man, I got to meet this man." And so they were following me, chasing me down as I was going after to meet, Mr. Naismith and his wife. And I showed up, finally got to, get up to where he was. And, there's all these incredible athletes there, but I had this autographed basketball with me, and I wanted the name Jim Naismith on this basketball. I wanted him to sign it for me, so I went up to him and I was just about to shake his hand, and his wife looks across at me and to my wife and says, I had a little, the upward star on my lapel, my suit lapel at the time. And it didn't say upward or anything, just had a star on there. And she says, "Is that an upward star?" I said, "Well, yes, ma'am, it is." She said, "Dr. Naismith would be so proud of that upward star because that's the way basketball was designed to be, was to use the game of basketball to share Jesus with young people, to make a difference in their life." And I thought I was going to fall to the floor.
Wow.
And my wife and I were so excited to hear her say that. And then of course, Jim Naismith said, "We have," I can't remember what he said, 4 or 5 grandchildren that are all participating in upward basketball in their hometown. And they said, "We go to this game every day. And I'm telling you, this is the way that Granddad envisioned basketball to be." And I just thought, man, go ahead, Lord, you can take me home.
Exactly. How amazing is that?
I'm so excited. I couldn't hardly stand it. It was so great.
The man who invents basketball, you find out, invented it for the same reason that you created Upward, to share the gospel. And I don't think a lot of people realize that now. Certainly, if you watch the NBA or even college basketball and the amazing sort of big business that it's become, but the original inventor of basketball did it so that people could come to Christ through sports. How cool is that?
Well, I mean, it's interesting. I told them when they did the article, I did a story on a report when I was in, I don't know, sixth or seventh grade on Dr. Naismith because I loved basketball so much. And I knew that he had done this through the YMCA and where it started, but all these stuff that I'd read, I'd never heard anything like that. And so just to get that kind of endorsement from, Jim Naismith and his wife was just, it was so encouraging. It was just so encouraging. So it was an exciting time to do that. So this story that you guys are doing has been a real blast.
Yeah, we're excited. It's coming out. It should be out now by the time this podcast airs. Our new issue of Sports Spectrum magazine. So check that out. You can check it out over at sportspectrum.com and become a member for, I think it's $36 for an entire year. So it's a really great deal.
Wow.
Talking to Cazz McCaslin here, founder and president of Upward Basketball on the Sports Spectrum podcast. And Cazz, I want to talk to you just about youth sports for a little bit. It's been since '95 since Upward came sort of into the fold. How has youth sports evolved over the years from when you started Upward to now? What has changed? What are you seeing?
Wow. Well, first of all, it's changed a lot. One of the things that we were really trying to tackle, and we saw a great opportunity just because so many people were coming to the church to play Upward basketball. When Upward was just at one church and I was on that staff, we just saw people coming in droves. I mean, we were doubling our league every year. And I think that we were answering a problem that a lot of parents were having to deal with everywhere they went to play. I mean, it was this, it's really not too far off of this in a lot of places, but there was this win at all costs, do whatever it takes to win the game, extremely, overbearing with really crazy rules that were in place and really a difficult thing for parents to deal with. I mean, parents would pay all this money and their kids would never get in a game, and we're talking first and second graders,
Yeah.
And so we put a lot of things in place, and everything we put in place, when you asked the question a little while ago about, getting this started, the number one thing that we did, obviously it was ministry, but we wanted to build that sports experience around the young athlete. We wanted this young athlete to realize the reason we did this was for the young athlete and really give them the opportunity to excel at a game. And you're never going to get better if you don't play, and certainly not in kindergarten or elementary school. You've got to have, time on the court. And so we put specific rules in place that made everybody have an equal opportunity for improvement. And that's all that anybody can ask, is the equal opportunity for improvement. And so one of the things that where we were 20 years ago was a lot of the outdoor pickup ball, recreation ball, a lot of that had gone to the side. I mean, you and I used to go outside and just find, 7 or 8 guys and start playing basketball. And now nobody does that. Everybody plays in some sort of organized league. Well, when we started creating these organized leagues all around the country, it really took off in a big way. Well, now here we are 20 years later, and it's almost like everybody has to be on some sort of a travel club team. Everybody has to be, going and staying at a hotel or going somewhere. But, one of the things that has really come out that's really been so difficult is there's really just two kind of coaches that are out there, and take the ministry side out of it. Just at every level, there's two kind of coaches. The one coach that says, what can this kid do for me? And the other coach that says, what can I do to help improve this young player? And that's really what we're trying to do, is to raise up leaders that want to pour into young athletes to see what we can do to make them better, not just athletically, but we base everything on Luke 2:52. Jesus grew in wisdom and stature and favor of God and man. So we call it mentally, athletically, spiritually, and socially. And I think that probably one of the biggest things that has happened over the years is that sports has just gotten so crazy that they're literally not thinking about anything except what it takes to win the game. I mean, I'll just tell you, at the time of this podcast right now, I hope this doesn't get off track too far, but some of the things that are happening at college football games, some of the vulgar comments and gyrations that people are doing, and the lack of concern by some of the media out there is very concerning to me. And some of these young athletes that are out there, I'm going to keep names out of it for now, but
Sure.
they're saying that shouldn't even affect whether or not they should be Heisman Trophy players or not. It's all about how good of a player he is. Well, man, if you look at the definition of a Heisman Trophy winner, it's excellence with integrity. And we've gotten away from that. We've gotten away from the integrity and the character that sports brings to young athletes. And I think that's one of the biggest things that's changed. It's been all about the game and who wins, as opposed to how you win through integrity and character. And I think it's vitally important that we get back to that, and all the incredible lessons that can be taught and learned from a team sport or an individual sport. We've gotten away from that, and we're trying desperately to pour into all aspects of a young athlete, mentally, athletically, spiritually, and socially. Socially has been such a big part, especially with all of the social media things that have come in to our young athletes nowadays. It's important that they learn what an incredible platform that they have, and the impact they can have through sports is important.
Well, I'll say one thing too, Caz. In the Upward basketball program, the one thing that you have made intentional in the way that this league is structured is every kid plays the same amount of time, which I know from some of the youth sports that we played in, even as a kid myself, but watching my daughter play youth sports not related to Upward, although she did go through the Upward program, but as a little bit older, the best kids are usually the ones that play, and then the least talented maybe get in, for a little bit here, a little bit there. In Upward, you made it a point to have every kid play an equal amount of time, and I can't tell you how many parents have come up to me and said, thank you for this. And I don't take any credit. Our church doesn't take any credit. It's Upward who should take the credit. But why was that so important for you to implement that specific thing on having every kid play an equal amount of time?
Well, one of the things that we've been a little criticized for, because I think sometimes it hasn't been we haven't really unpacked it for every single person, but we've been known to use this terminology. Every child is a winner. And if you only hear that and you don't unpack that a little bit, you can say, oh man, Upwards, they're not doing this, or they're not doing that, or they they're not about, they don't understand winning and losing.
Right.
And that's really a misconception. When we say that every child is a winner, we know that there is a winner down inside of every child, and it's our responsibility as adults and as parents and as coaches to draw that winner out of every child. And just because a young player, a young child might be a little more gifted athletically at a certain time, if we don't give these other kids the opportunity to practice and to play, we'll never see that. And I actually I had the incredible joy of sitting down with Coach John Wooden for about 2 hours one time, and just recording a conversation with him. And I asked him this very thing. I said, what do you think about this statement, every child is a winner? He said, oh, I couldn't agree more. I said, well, tell me about it from your perspective. And he said, Caz, he said, I have won a lot of games with a bunch of losers, and I have lost a lot of games with a bunch of winners. But there's a big difference between winning and losing, and winner and loser. And he said, every child is a winner. He said, but, if you don't give a child a chance, you'll never know in the different areas where you can draw that winner out. And it's been really interesting over the years to see all the different leagues, city leagues, county leagues, school leagues that are around Upward that have begun changing the rules to do the same thing, because it's so important that every child gets the opportunity for improvement. And again, for us, it was about creating experience for the athlete and for the players. I mean, for the parents, for them to realize, man, I can get better at this. And you know this better than anybody. And really the credit really does go to the coaches and the churches, because there's no way we could implement an upward league from where we are. But, when these churches take these these rules and these, I hate to even call them rules, but these guidelines, and they implement them into their leagues, they will see that their players get better, their leagues get bigger, and the parents get more excited about it because everybody's involved. And it doesn't make the game any less competitive, because, as you know, not only do we allow every child to play, but we structure it in such a way that every child gets to play against another player of equal ability.
Yes.
And so you might have players that are a little more challenged athletically, but what we do is we make sure that the players on the other team are in the game at the same time. So as a result, it's no less competitive. It's very competitive, because you got the best players playing each other, and those that need more help or more experience playing against each other at the same time. So you got these individual, very competitive games going on at the same time. And we also don't say that, that there's not a team that doesn't lose or doesn't win, because we have a winner and a loser at every game, and we learn from those things. And so
Absolutely.
it's important to have those things. So when people think that Upward might not be as competitive, quite frankly, I think it's one of the most competitive leagues that's out there, because I'll tell you what's not competitive. And that's when you take all the best players and you put them on one team and they go out there and beat everybody else. That's really not competing. To me, that's quite frankly, it's personal opinion, but that's cheating.
Yeah.
And what really makes it, you look at college or the pros, they have salary caps, they have all these NCAA rules for recruiting, and they do all these things because they're trying to create equal teams. And that's what makes competition so fun.
I wanted to ask you, Cazz, as we wrap up here, a couple more questions with you. First of all, your book, it's called Coach 'em Up, Reclaiming Sports for the Benefit of the Athlete. A lot of what's in this book is what you've explained to me thus far and to our audience, but tell us why you wrote this book and the meaning behind it.
Well, it's really a challenge to the coaches for sure. And one of the things that we talked about, the very first line in the book actually says, about the two different kinds of coaches, and then the rest of it is unpacking that as a coach. How can we pour into these kids mentally, athletically, spiritually, and socially? And we did this just to hopefully inspire and encourage coaches to go back to why they began coaching to begin with. Because, coaches, sometimes I think when they get into it for the love of the game, it's really the love of watching a young athlete get better and improve on what they do. And hopefully through this book, our desire is to point them to not just athletically, but all the different ways that they can pour into them, mentally, spiritually, and socially as well. And to bring it back to the athlete, transforming, and turning this back to the athlete is what makes it so important. It's why we wrote the book, is to remember the reason we got into coaching, the reason we got into this. And even Billy Graham himself said that, the number one person that has a influence, the biggest influence on a child's life is a coach, oftentimes even more than a parent.
Yeah.
And that's a big statement coming from somebody like himself. And so, we really, we think through that. And that's one of the main reasons we wrote the book, so that we could have that opportunity to really pour into these young athletes and to bring sports back to the benefit of the athlete.
That's great. Cazz, if somebody is listening to this podcast, they go to a church, they might be a leader in the church. Maybe they don't even go to church, but they have this vision of a youth basketball league, and Upward sounds like something they want to learn more about. Maybe they want to start a league. That's what our church did back in 2006. We saw what Upward basketball was about. There's not a lot of Upward leagues up here in the Northeast in Connecticut, so we decided to try it and start it, and it's taken off, and we're on our 13th season this year. And so for those that might want to become part of Upward, not just play in a league or have their kids play in one, but to actually start a league, how can they go about doing that?
Well, it's really simple to get the information. One of the first things you do, you just go to upward.org. And there's two options there. You can either find a league where you can play, or there's a button there where you can click that says start a league in your community. And this can be started by anybody that has just got a passion for creating a transformational sports experience in your community. And we really want to use it to do that. And we could partner with you and partner with your church. But then we'll get you the information necessary, and then we'll walk you through how to go through the training. And once you're trained in how to do this as a leader, then we'll show you how we can partner together. And literally, we want to be a total turnkey solution for you to be able to do everything you need, from training your coaches and referees to providing you all of the things necessary needed to do that. So it's really a pretty simple thing, just by looking at upward.org and start a league near you, and we can make it happen. So we'd love to do that. Not just basketball, but flag football, soccer, cheerleading as well.
Yeah, we have our cheerleading program as part of our Upward basketball program, and it's really been great. And just big fan of it. Love the idea, love the concept. So glad that we're a part of it, and the community has been a big fan of that league too. So we really appreciate it. That's upward.org. So check out the website, upward.org. Cazz, this has been a pleasure. We ask this question as we close our podcast to every guest that we have, and it's a simple question, sometimes not a simple answer. For you, Cazz McCaslin, right now, what has the Lord been teaching you? What are you learning from God?
It's been it's a great question, and today what the Lord has really been speaking to me on is really just to be still and to hear His voice. As we were sharing earlier in the podcast about that faith and fear, as anybody goes, as your ministry is growing and you're going a different, going down the path, He continually brings you to points in your life that require you to hear His voice. And they're continually bringing you to a point where you got to step out on faith. And I tell you, He's teaching me to be bold in that. And it's fearful. It's a scary time when you're really waiting to hear His voice. But right now, I'm constantly reminded of that verse in Matthew: "Seek ye first the kingdom of God, and all these things shall be added unto you." And so today, where I've been right now, is to constantly be seeking His face every day, constantly be listening for His voice. And I'm waiting. I was about to say patiently. I'm supposed to be waiting patiently. I want to be so patiently waiting for that moment when He says, "Kaz, this is what's next. This is what I want you to do next." And really, for me today, I'm at that. I feel like we're at that fork in the road with Upward, where we're very excited about where the Lord's leading us with this new vision of what He's given us to do. And it's been really exciting because a lot of people, when they hear about Upward, they know about the kindergarten through sixth grade, and there's been a real desire from a lot of parents and a lot of athletes for us to take this to the next generation and take it all the way through, and to try to provide the solutions through this travel ball and club ball. And we want to do that with the same integrity and character that we've done with the recreational leagues. And we want this to be something that is fluid from kindergarten all the way through 12th grade. And so we're really just praying about, and we're testing a lot of different things. And we're trying to be really, really patient and hear God's voice on how He wants us to make that happen. So we're constantly waiting to hear His voice. And that's really where I am right now today, is waiting to hear that. And I can't wait as He speaks to us each step of the way. He's been giving us what we need to hear for now, and we just keep following step for step, and we're anxious to hear what's next.
He is Cazz McCaslin, the founder and president of Upward Sports. You can go to upward.org to find out more about that. And Cazz, it has been a pleasure. It has been awesome to speak with you, and we really do appreciate you being here on the Sports Spectrum podcast.
Thank you so much for all you do, Jason. You guys do a fantastic job. It's a joy to partner along with you. Thank you for the opportunity.
And we do thank Cazz McCaslin, founder and president of Upward Basketball, for joining us here on the Sports Spectrum podcast. And again, if you're thinking about maybe starting a youth sports league, there's really a lot of good stuff that Cazz had to say there. But you can check all of that out at their website. It is upward.org, upward.org. And you can check it out, see if it makes sense to have maybe your church or sort of nonprofit, faith-based organization start a basketball league. But our church has been doing it now for 12 years. And, we're not a big church, maybe 300 people. And we started it back in 2006 with 30 or 40 kids, and it's grown to about 200 kids now, and it's really been a great outreach for the community. And so check it out. Maybe it's something that you feel called to be a part of. Maybe your church wants to be a part of. Maybe it's already a part of the Upward League. And if it is, please let us know. We'd love to hear your stories about how Upward has been a wonderful blessing for your church and for your kids. And also, we just want to hear your feedback, and you can get in touch with us via Twitter at sports_spectrum, or you can email me, jason@sportsspectrum.com, jason@sportsspectrum.com. Send us your stories, send us your ideas, send us your feedback, good or bad. We want to hear from you. And also, here's an easy way. So if you leave a review on iTunes, leave a review over at iTunes. Let us know that you heard Cazz McCaslin on the Sports Spectrum podcast, and then email me that review. So just email me and say, hey, I left this review on iTunes, and I want in. And basically what that means is I have a copy of Cazz's book, Coach 'em Up, Reclaiming Sports for the Benefit of the Athlete. If you'd like to receive this book for free, leave a review on iTunes, and I'll make sure we get you a copy of Cazz McCaslin's new book, Coach 'em Up. Thank you so much for joining us here, and we will see you next time, right here on the Sports Spectrum podcast. Have a great one, everybody.